Hello, welcome to the third piece on revenue. We looked at some of the basic accounting. We took a more in-depth dive into ASC 606. Now we're going to look at the analytics. Once you understand how revenue is derived, what the accounting is, what's your rate volume, we now need to start the analytical process. Why do we start with the analysis of revenue? First thing is it is the foundation of analysis is revenue. Everything derives from that. Normalized expenses are best seen in relationship to revenues. Looking at baseline expenses without relating it to revenue isn't going to tell you anything. We also have a lot of performance indicators are based on revenue. We'll take a look at some of them next week. Revenue is also needed for the cash flow process and for capital planning. How are we going to allocate our resources? So this is the very beginning. There's two analysis techniques that we're going to look at. One is sales trend and growth rates, and we're going to look at 5-year period, oldest to newest, because we're going to actually be able to do a forecast going forward. You start with a tabular format, and then you move on to compute annual and 5-year growth rates. And then you do a visual display. Second is we explain period to period changes by using the volume and rate drivers that you spent time already deriving. Now, this is one that for many companies is making comparison and analytics a little bit harder, and that is mergers and acquisitions. There's been a lot in a lot of the companies that we're looking at and have looked at in financial statement analysis have been impacted by that because they're growth companies. And many times that growth can distort some of the numbers. So we could do a couple of things. One, we could leave it in and then just comment on it in the analytics when we explain it. We could look at organic growth, in other words, take it out and see what organic growth is and then layer in that. Or we could restate history to bring in the companies as if they had been together for 5 years to see the real growth rate. Sometimes that's possible, other times it's not. But we need to be aware of that. So the first thing we have is right here is this sales growth, 5-year period, oldest to youngest. Start with tabular, compute annual and 5-year average growth rate, visual display. Now, once we did this up, okay, then as we move forward to forecasting and then valuation, we're going to use this data to move forward. And then we're going to explain period to period using the rate and volume. And we need to be very much aware of acquisitions and make a decision of how to handle it. Is there a right or wrong way on this? No. You just need to be very clear what it is. Let's take a look at two companies to get a better understanding of what's going on. What I have here is my Steel Dynamics worksheet. And one of the things to note on this is that this includes the one you're looking at right now, has everything that we'll be working on for the next few weeks. So, as again, I started with my 10K data. I brought it all together. I then put it into an income statement. Here's my tabular format. I common sized it. I did my growth. Have my chart visually. So now we're going to go and take a look at sales analysis. So if we go to sales analysis, the first thing I did was look at what were the sales in each of their years. So this information, as you can tell, came directly from the 10K. I then calculated the growth and then did it as a percentage. I then looked at what the 5-year growth rate was and saw that it grew at 13%. So this is my data, okay? We then come over here and I created this graph to visually show you what's happening with their sales. So what we can see is 2015 wasn't really a good year for them. And then it's popped back up. So we can visually see what's happened. Then I broke it down this way, looking at the sales by segment. Because of that, I thought was fairly meaningful, because one of their strategies for success in the future is to expand their value-added products. So now what I did is I took the 4 segments, I broke them down, and I saw where the change was. And what I'm seeing is that I can see where the change is, and it's steel operations, which is the bulk of their company. But when you see how it's grown relative to others, you get a good piece. Okay, so that takes us, so I said, I'm going to take a look at that, and that's the big piece. So then I'm going to analyze each of these components to see what happened. Now, this up here is 5 years. This here, I'm only looking at 3. And here, I'm looking at 3 also. So if you're paying attention, these numbers all came over here, and then tons in millions, which I found in the 10K, I put them in, and then I was able to, I knew that. So all of these are inputs, okay? So these 3 inputs from 10K, that's from above, inputs from 10K. So this is the basic data. There's the sales, the dollar amount. Here are the volume indicators. This is volume. Let me just make a note there. Volume. And this is the rate indicator. These came from the 10K. So then what I did is I did a calculation to see what the change was, because we know that the volume went up. Here was the 2017 volume. Here's the 2018 volume. So it went up by 648 million tons more they produced. Okay. The price also went from 767 to 922. So this total $2 billion increase here was a result of both producing more and selling and increasing the price. So how do we do that? So the first thing we do is we take Q44, which is the price, change in the price. So to determine the volume, we knew the volume went up by 648. So I multiplied the increase in volume by last year's cost. Okay, so 648 times 767, what we found is that the increase attributable to volume was 497. Okay, because I took this year's increase in volume times last year's price. Then to compute that which is attributable to rate, because we know it went up $155 a ton, I multiplied 155, which is the 045 times P 45, which is this year's volume. And what happened is it told me that the rate caused an increase of 1,549,000. So what we've done is we've broken this down, and we're able now to interpret what this means is that we can see there's both. So we've now explained it. So we're going to be able to, as we move forward, be able to forecast some of this stuff. I did the same thing here. Okay. Then I broke it down into the other businesses to see what each one of them was. So this is really a key piece to start everything, because costs are going to relate to each one of these. And this change, we're going to see certain things from a cost perspective on volume, what's capacity we're going to look at. Then we're going to look at, when it comes to rate, did the input costs go up, or were they able to price better? So here's an example of steel dynamics that I think worked pretty well. Now, let's go take a look at Geneseo Coffee Company, because that should be here. Let's take a look at Olin Company, and we start out with, here's the sales. This is the growth, and look at that, okay? That's clearly a merger. So we don't want to necessarily look at that 94. But in this case, the individual who did this left it in. That's okay, because we just now need to know that there was a merger that drove that. So we're looking at a 30% 5-year growth rate. So that gives us the rough idea. And here it is shown virtually. They then broke it down by which sector. In this case, it was chlorel, alkali, epoxy, and Winchester. And we can see where the increase came in. It was all in the epoxy business. So the epoxy business was acquired. So that would be, when we start writing this up and looking at it and forecasting, we've now brought it down to it's right there. That's the business line. But if we just look at the base chloralkali, we can see again, we've taken the volume. Okay, here's the dollars. There's the volume, tons, and the rate. So again, we could calculate out how much is attributable to each one. And then we can say the volume went down. Okay, they produce less. And then the price went up, and the increase in price is what drove the big increase in dollar volume. Okay, and here we can see the same thing, but we also saw a massive increase in cost, in increase in rate. Okay, so this is just another example of what it could look like. So if you got any questions, just let me know.